Thank you for the opportunity to introduce the SHERPA Sustainability Management System to you today. I'd like to structure this session as follows. I will start with a quick reflection on the key problems that SHERPA is seeking to address. I'll then look at some important features of the approach and solutions embodied within the platform, and then I will step through into the platform to give a quick tour of the system, both the SHERPA application that is used by the sites, as well as the super user tool. So very briefly, what are the two challenges that produce supply chains face? The first is that farmers often have a sense of being trapped. They face fatigue as a result of the amount of standards and compliance schemes requirements that they're having to address and deal with. But also, somewhat ironically, they also become more vulnerable to threats to their long-term sustainability and resilience. So what we see is more fatigue and frustration building, but also with all the work that goes into managing these standards, there is a belief that the standards are actually addressing sustainability for them, which means they are not really engaging strategically or proactively with the subject, leaving them vulnerable to blind spots and disruptive changes creeping up on them. So we depict this as these two interlinked vicious cycles, fatigue on the one side and growing vulnerability on the other, and there's this sense of a lose-lose situation and farmers being trapped within that. So the second core challenge is the non-uniformity and complexity of global produce supply networks. There's a high level of non-uniformity and variability when you just look at all the different sourcing regions potentially around the world. Each region is made up of multiple different farmers and farming sites, each within their own sub-regions and valleys, and with great variability on each farm. Each has different biophysical characteristics at macro and micro scales, different climatic pressures, different social, cultural, and political dynamics, and importantly, different people, different personalities making decisions within these farming units. And this demands that we have to resist a one-size-fits-all approach. We have to somehow accommodate this non-uniformity. And yet, on the other side of this is customers demanding a high degree of control and uniformity in their supply chains. And this demands a consistent and uniform approach. So reconciling these two seemingly contradictory requirements is a real challenge. And addressing these two challenges, that of farmers being trapped in this lose-lose situation and in dealing with non-uniformity in global produce networks, is embedded within the SHERPA approach and suite of solutions. Before we get into the demo, I'd like to touch on a few key concepts and aspects of the SHERPA approach. The first relates to the way change happens in reality. In any business, what we see outwardly is always a function of what is happening at a much deeper level within the business. This inside, outward, or bottom-up flow depicts the way things happen. What is also clear is that if we want to achieve real change, for example, to achieve fundamentally more ecologically and socially sustainable farming systems, it has to start at the core of this process with what the decision makers see as important, their insights, convictions, priorities, etc., and then to work from there outward. And yet, the predominant mode of engaging farms around sustainability issues is via top-down programs that really assess the results and impacts and seldom, if ever, speak to the culture in the business, to leadership or the deeper convictions of the decision makers. What SHERPA endeavors to do is to be aligned with the way change does happen in reality, with this inside-out flow, and it being designed, therefore, as a strategic management system as opposed to a compliance system, so that it can support this deeper change and the journey from inside to outside that's required. The second aspect to look at is the way that we develop content and bring in the systems view, and it acknowledges the importance of developing a holistic and integrated view and understanding of sustainability. And this simple systems diagram actually packs in a lot of meaning. It shows the interconnectedness of things. It shows where the dependencies and the impacts are. It shows that the farm, or any business for that matter, cannot be viable without healthy social and environmental dimensions. And it also introduces 8 key principles that need to be respected as a minimum for the business to be viable and resilient over the long term. So this gives us a very high-level view of what we should be shooting at or aiming for. We then take this systems perspective and address it in this hierarchical way, showing the dimensions at the top, the 8 principles that underpin them at the next level, and then at the third level, we introduce what we call the characteristics. These are the detailed outcomes we would expect to see in evidence on the farm or in the business we're examining, where the higher principles are being respected. The characteristics therefore provide the detailed description of what a sustainable farming system should or would look like. Together they describe the ideal future state. This is what we should be aiming towards. We then use that depiction of the ideal future state as a basis for the self-assessment. We assess the current status of the business, here standing in the present, looking towards that ideal future state, and use that to determine through a backcasting technique, where am I currently in relation to this ideal, and how big are the gaps between where I am now and where I need to be for each of these characteristics. And finally, just to set the context for the super user tool and where it fits in, here we see a simple depiction of the supply chain, and we have the sustainability management system providing the online service to the sites and supporting them in their sustainability strategy. And in the use of the tool, we have our Blue North team. We engage through onboarding and advisory services that are coupled with the SHERPA implementation. But what we're also doing is accessing the broader sustainability knowledge community and feeding that information back into what is in the SHERPA content, the SHERPA frameworks, so that that is always expressed and sort of dynamically updated so that the sites are constantly working with the latest ideas and thinking. But the final piece of the jigsaw is the consolidation of all of this output, compiling here in an online tool in the cloud into various aggregated reports and sharing these to stakeholders as needed across the supply chain. And this is where the super user tool that I'll be showing you shortly comes in. So what we have here, just in summary, is the ability to deal with the non-uniformity at farms. We're able to address the challenges of moving from top-down to a bottom-up approach, but by applying this approach through an online platform and consistently, we're able to then, through the super user tool, communicate and engage with downstream stakeholders who have an interest in what's going on here, but in a consistent way, in a uniform way that is able to meaningfully demonstrate continuous improvement and progress towards greater resilience, greater sustainability. So what I'd like to do now is take you on a quick tour through the SHERPA online tool and super user tool. So this is the SHERPA website, and it's from here that you can register onto the platform and log in. And we log in now into the tool. Just to show you the structure, there's a dashboard. So this is what a farm management team would typically see. They've got a dashboard that just gives them an overview of how they're doing with their improvement plan, how far they got with the assessment, how far they got with data collection for the KPIs. This is the menu item for getting into the strategic assessment. Here's where you go into the performance indicators, and here's where you develop the action plans. All the business units that are on this organization's profile are then shown in this drop-down menu, and you can page through between them. Just to have a look at the strategic assessment, I've selected a business unit that is set up on the light assessment model. When you step in, you get into this dashboard that just shows you progress with the implementation or the completion of the assessment. It indicates here that it's still in progress. So I'm now going to step into the self-assessment page. And again, this is the light assessment. These are the characteristic statements down the left-hand side. So these are the descriptors of the ideal. Against each of these, there's a guidance note that explains or justifies the inclusion of that characteristic or that outcome. One can add notes and attach documents here as you go through it. And then we ask two questions in the light assessment: is what is your level of management commitment to achieving this outcome? And what is the level of practical action being taken that's consistent with achieving or fulfilling this particular outcome? And they simply answer, I don't know, low, medium, or high management commitment, or I don't know, low, medium, or high level of practical actions being taken. And there's a bit of guidance under each one of these modals, and they simply select whichever's applicable to them, and the system will update. A lot of guidance notes in the tool. So we've summarized all the relevant good management practices or best management practices. We're also able to do the assessment according to principles. I spoke of the 8 principles earlier, so this is a different way of grouping the characteristics. Perhaps at this point, it's also worth just showing we have now built in a multi-language capability into the tool. So if I just flick into my chosen language, in this case Spanish, now the whole tool renders in Spanish, from the menu items to the all the headers, all the guidance notes, everything is now in Spanish. All the characterizations here, the guidance notes, the good management practices, the works comes through in that language. So once I've completed my assessment, I can now go in and look at my reporting. And I start to get these graphical depictions of how my system is looking. Where am I strong? Where am I weak? And again, this is to drive insight, to drive those aha realizations. What is the state of my system in the present in comparison to that ideal that was described? I can start to get a quick picture of this at a dimension level, at a principle level. I can look at these spider graphs and I can see everything to do with the economic dimension is all here. I can just hover over and I can see how each one is scoring, but I get this visual picture of how the business is performing. These are the results now grouped according to these management focus areas. So everything to do with water, to do with human resource management. And then finally, I'm able to see them in these bar charts, which I'm able to now sort. This is about an evaluation. Where is my system strong? Where is it potentially weak? And this starts to focus attention and ideas around what do we need to strengthen and bring onto the improvement agenda. We also have the ability to go in and capture data for a whole suite of performance indicators, whether it's carbon footprint, soil carbon levels, biodiversity, staff matters in terms of staff turnover, and what have you. You can go in and set up the data collection sheet and it'll calculate all the KPIs which you can bring back into the reporting. Again, it's a management tool, so we're wanting to enable a business to use this as the basis to underpin their improvement programs and just overall strategically manage their farming business. That's the SHERPA app. That is what is applied at site level. What I want to close off with now is the super user tool that I referred to. This is the super user tool set up for Worldwide Fruit. Just to step into this. So now the Worldwide Fruit team have access to this. They can very quickly see which farming units are rolling out, are part of the implementation, who's completed the assessment and to what degree. I can see which commodities are in the mix, which countries are involved. I can zoom in and see where they're located and so on. Just very nice aggregated reporting that allows Worldwide Fruit to have a real handle on the rollout and importantly to be able to convey progress. Then we can step into some of the results. I showed the systems map earlier, but now we can actually populate it like a dashboard, see how the assessments are looking. These are all the units down the right hand side here. I can start to click through the different businesses and start to see how they are rating themselves and just get an idea of how are these farming businesses, each in their own unique settings, how are they rating themselves and what are the strengths and weaknesses that they're identifying and what are they taking into their improvement planning and prioritizations for continuous improvement. We can dive into the detail. We're also able to go in and drill through and see how that specific business unit has rated themselves. Now we're getting into the detail of their results and we can go in further here and we can have a look at how does this look at in detail. So it's got this drill through functionality. And then finally, just to show you, this is what we're using in the recommendation reports now. We use this waterfall chart approach, which is basically if it's a green bar, it's contributing, it's a capital stock that's contributing to their well-being. If it's a red bar, it's detracting. So these are pluses, these step it down, this takes it up, this takes it down. And then this gray bar, this is 0 over here, shows a negative resilience rating, and we're able to drill through and see the detail there and then use this as a basis to start to identify which are the areas that they should focus on. This is just part of the analysis that we're able to do in the BI tool or in the super user tool that we don't have in the site level tool. And of course we're very easily able to switch between the different sites, see things in different ways at a commodity level or a region level, do benchmark analysis, and so on. So that is the BI tool. As I said, that is constantly evolving as we progress with the implementation. Thank you very much.